born with, not in early life, but you develop in later life. The reason that I'm talking to you this morning is about a real pal of the station. He is the best known solicitor in the UK, Nick Freeman, otherwise known as Mr. Loophole. And Nick emailed me yesterday. I'm delighted to get him on the show this morning. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Daniel. Thanks very much for having me on. Appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. Tell us all about your brother, because you're doing something that you are calling the 60-60-60, which we'll talk about. But your brother at the age of 55, some 5 years ago, developed Parkinson's.
He's 3 years younger than me. Big, strapping guy, very physical guy. And, years before his diagnosis, we used to start walking together in the hills. And I used to say, come on, John, get a move on. Why are you moving so slowly, In any case, he was, he was seeing doctors and no one was diagnosing the problem. And then they started to be suspicious that maybe he did have Parkinson's. And they then have to measure your deterioration over a period of time. That's the way they actually end up diagnosing it. And at the age of 55, he was diagnosed. And so he's had it now since diagnosis for he'll be 60 on the 29th of January this year. So in a few days' time. And it's very frustrating as an older brother. We were both very physical. I thankfully still am physical, and obviously I watch him, and he has serious limitations now. So
Nick, forgive me, over the last 5 years, how has he deteriorated? What can you see that's different?
He's very slow and robotical. So if you watch him, for example, put a fork to his mouth, it's very deliberate and it's very slow. And you obviously know, sadly, that there's something wrong with him. He's not right. His speech is not bad at all, but his physical gait, his movements, the normal movements, are just exaggerated slow, almost in slow motion. And as far as his brain's concerned, that doesn't operate with the same dexterity and speed that it used to. So whereas he used to look after all my mum's affairs, he now just can't work things out, and so I do that for him. There's three of us, but he's the middle brother, and sadly he's the one who's been diagnosed. There's no previous Parkinson's in our family at all.
Sure. How is he coping with this? Because I dare say that there is still a bright, vivacious 60-year-old fella in there somewhere.
Absolutely, he's got fantastic sense of humour. And we do take the mickey out of each other. Well, I take the mickey out of him a lot. That's our coping mechanism is humour, as well as support. But so he's just moved into a bungalow, and he's adapted his life and changed his life, and he doesn't work anymore, and he's living a much more sedentary life. He walks. He's a dog lover. He walks, and he still walks every day. Not so far, and obviously very, very slowly. So he's coping, and his expectations are not like they used to be. So his expectations of life and the future are very different. So he's actually accepted that rather than fighting it. If you're a well person, you become ill, you either accept it or you fight it. And he obviously hasn't given up, and hopefully a cure's on the horizon. But he's altered his life massively, and sadly, he can't. One of his symptoms is he just doesn't sleep. So,
oh wow,
at 2:30 every morning, he gets up and he goes to the 24-hour Tesco, and they know him well there, and he just wanders around, something to do, and that you can imagine how tired you then are. So it's uncomfortable for him, and he's trying to live his life to the best, but it's very debilitating, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to watch and witness, and you think, what can you do to help? And
if you've noticed over the last 5 years this rapid deterioration from the striding man that he once went on long walks with his beloved older brother to the robotic, sedentary existence, Nick, what's his immediate prognosis over the next 5-10 years?
Well, you don't die of Parkinson's. You try and manage the illness, and it's to do with the levels of dopamine. So he has drugs, obviously, on a regular basis every day. He takes them several times a day, and if you manage it at the right level, and that's the trick, trying to get it at the right level, that reduces the shaking, and it gives you a reasonable level of existence. That there is and we're looking all the time. I mean, there was a program on just under a year ago, a 2-part serial. I think it was the BBC. I watched it, and it looked like they'd found a cure, and it was a brain operation. And what they do is they kill certain cells in the brain, and that seemed to remove the symptoms of Parkinson's. And some people made a massive recovery, but what they discovered was that the placebo effect because they had placebos that were given to some of the trial patients, and that also worked. And because the statistics weren't strong enough, they've actually abandoned that research. And one of the strange things about Parkinson's is, people don't realize how popular it is, and how many people get it. That there's 145,000 new diagnoses every year. 2 people are diagnosed every hour. And in terms of the population, 1 in every 500 of us will get it. And there is no government funding whatsoever. So all the research is dependent upon charitable donations. And they are tantalizingly close to finding a cure. So we're hopeful because he's a very positive person. He's optimistic. We're hoping that over the next few years, they will find a cure and they will reverse it. The sort of cure that they find is similar to MS, and that's what they're working on. So although he's deteriorating at the moment, we're hoping that when they find the cure, it will be reversed because, as I say, he's positive, he's optimistic, and he's got massive support around him.
Sure. He sounds the sort of character, Nick, I've never met the guy, but he sounds the sort of character that if there were some tests and they needed somebody to personally undergo a test for something pioneering or revolutionary, would he rule that in or out, do you think?
He'd be the first in the line.
I bet you he would, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. He'd one doesn't like to use the word guinea pig, but he'd be
avoided that, yeah.
Delighted to anything that's available. And, he discusses it. He sees his consultant, I think, every 6 months or every 3 months. So I think it's every 6 months. And, they discuss the new pioneering treatment that's available, and they're looking for volunteers, and they're looking for volunteers for the right sort of treatment. But they have to also balance where you are with your disease, and he bizarrely is still in what's called the honeymoon period of the disease, which obviously is a rather strange way of describing it. But
misnomer, if ever there was one.
It certainly is a misnomer, because I see him probably every 4 weeks, and when you don't see someone every day, you do notice a change.
Of course you do. Tell us about the 60-60-60, Nick.
So I thought, well, look, he's 60 years of age. He will be in a few days. And we live more or less, he lives in North Nottinghamshire. I live in Cheshire. And I thought, well, if you go as the crow flies over the hills through Cheshire, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, it's about 60 miles, a little bit further. And I thought, well, what's a reasonable amount to try and raise? And I thought, well, hopefully I can raise £60,000 or more. So I just thought, well, that seems to be a good name. It's to celebrate his 60th birthday. I want to raise at least £60,000, and it's about 60 miles. And so what I'm planning on doing is doing it with my dog, George, who's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, and I'm hopeful that there will be people. Some people with Parkinson's will join me for a little bit. My mother, who's 88, is going to do the last mile. My brother John is going to do, hopefully, the last few miles. Depending on how he is at the time. We're starting the walk on March the 23rd, and I'm hoping that people will join us. And my plan is, apart from going through some stunning scenery, is to make it an enjoyable experience, to welcome people, and to try and tempt people along. I'm going to be giving free legal advice. So it's going to be a walking legal surgery.
And with your dog,
it's... Pro bono.
Well, I was about to say, with
only
your
in
dog...
areas that I'm able to advise on, but they're quite extensive.
Nick, with your dog, there's a double pro bono.
Yeah, and my dog, well, he won't hopefully need any legal advice on route. He's very well behaved.
Bono, okay.
So I'm hoping there'll be dog walkers, and I'm hoping to get some lawyers walking with me. I'm hoping at the end that it will be a bit like the Pied Piper, and I'm going to attract people, and it will be a fun, probably 3 or 4 day walk. It just depends on the terrain and the weather.
Nick, can I thank you? Have you been in touch with the BBC local stations where you will be walking through their patches? Because they would love to talk to you.
Yes, I'm going to do that. You are one of my first people, Danny, you know I'm very grateful for you having on. But I am going to obviously contact Cheshire, Derbyshire, and Nottinghamshire as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm delighted that you've given us the first interview, Nick. How's that beautiful Bentley of yours?
Well, if it's going for an MOT today, Danny, as you asked, after I finish with you, it's going straight in for an MOT. Could I just say to your listeners that if they were tempted or wanted to give, there is a Just Giving page, and if they go on the Just Giving page and Google Nick Freeman, I come up, I think, at the moment, top of the list, because the Just Giving page was only set up yesterday. So,
Nick Freeman,
you know, it's unfortunate this illness doesn't discriminate in areas of the country. I mean, one of the peculiar things, if I can just briefly say, is my brother lived on a country lane, and the 3 other men on his remote country lane, where they used to spray chemicals on the fields, all contracted Parkinsons, which is strange. But,
so is there a link there?
Yeah, it's very hard to establish, very hard to prove, isn't it? That's the difficulty.
One hell of a coincidence.
I think there is, but obviously it affects people all over the country, sadly in the West Midlands as well. So there is a Just Giving page, and obviously I'd be delighted if any of your listeners would like to join me on the walk, or simply would like to contribute or just provide support. That will be very welcomely received.
Of course, it says on my screen it's Nicholas Freeman and then the number 4 for some reason. So not Nick Freeman, Nicholas Freeman and then the number 4.
Lovely. Thank you, Danny.
Take care, mate. Let me know how you get on.
Thank you, Danny. I will. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed. All the best to you. Thank you very much indeed, Nick Freeman there, pal of the station. And if you want to donate a few bob on the justgiving.com, then just put his name in, Nicholas Freeman, and then, I don't know why, but the digit 4 number.